All right, hello everybody and welcome to another MECLA Spotlight event. So I'd like to welcome all the members of the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance. Today we're going to shine a spotlight on policy levers to support the uptake of low carbon materials and decarbonising the construction and building supply chain. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Monica Richter. I work in WWF in the conservation team and climate and food security program, and I have the great pleasure of being a project director for MECLA and also introducing today's event and today's speakers. So before going any further, in the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that we are on traditional custodians of country, Aboriginal land and connections to land, sea and community. We are meeting today on Aboriginal land right across the country, and I would like to pay my respects on our behalf to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who we're participating with today. So we will be recording this session. It will be available on our website and YouTube channel for those who have missed it or wish to watch it again. We have about 180 registered attendees, so very much welcome to you all. Please mute your microphones. You will get a chance to ask some questions. You can certainly use the chat function for comments and questions. We will be asking for and speakers will get a chance to respond to some of those questions and we'll field some of those through the event. And just so you know, for those who are members of the Green Building Council of Australia, this event does qualify for 1 CPD point. You have to email us to be able to get a confirmation of your registration. And finally, we would like to remind all MECLA members and attendees of our governance requirements. MECLA does not tolerate any anti-competitive behaviour. We operate in a pre-competitive environment. So if you're aware of a conflict of interest, please speak up, email us, and we may adjust accordingly. So I would like to say thank you to all our founding partners and members who have come on board recently. We are an alliance of over 140 organisations, and it is members' willingness to contribute their time, their intellectual effort, funding to a common objective that makes MECLA so successful. It is this objective to find solutions in decarbonising the embodied carbon of the building materials that we use as we align to the Paris Agreement and circularity principles that makes up the fundamental purpose of the Alliance and why we work together. Also, MECLA is a do tank. That means we're all about action. We're about sharing knowledge across the construction ecosystem to overcome the barriers to the uptake of low emissions materials. And today we are focusing on the role of government as a policymaker, regulator, procurer, and a key enabler to drive down emissions and embodied carbon. Infrastructure influences 70% of Australia's emissions, and infrastructure decisions can either lock in business as usual emissions or accelerate innovation. So the decisions made today are fundamental to achieving the ambitious targets that we have set. So we have another fabulous lineup of speakers today, and I'd like to introduce them to you. So today we have a government representative. We have Peta Olesen, who is the Director of International Climate and Net Zero Pathways Division in the Federal Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. Peta is an Australian government strategic lead for mission innovation, which some of you may be familiar with, the Clean Energy Ministerial, the Breakthrough Agenda, and the Leadership Group for Industry Transition. After Peta, Hudson Worsley, who is the co-founder of Precinct Consulting Group and the chair of MECLA. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but I think it's his ability to communicate complex technical concepts in a clear language through storytelling that is one of the key successes of how he achieves the work that he does. We also have the CEO of Infrastructure Partnerships Australia, Adrian Dwyer, who's worked across a whole range of different infrastructure organisations in his time. Following Adrian, We have a joint presentation from Teresa Scott, who's the Executive Director for the Australasian Procurement and Construction Council, as well as Adjunct Professor Dr. Robin Hardy. So Teresa has the job of corralling and engaging the Council of Chief Executives of the APCC and expanding APCC's role as a leading public sector procurement and construction forum. And Robin, who is now retired, but has had over 25 years experience in Australian and ACT public sector with a real passion for building management related topics at the University of Canberra. She has been an executive director and a head of the shared services procurement for the ACT. And you know, the ACT has led the way in many of these areas. So we're really interested to hear from Robin. Mitch Shannon. Mitch is a director with Pollination. He has extensive experience providing legal and strategic advice to governments and business on energy policy markets, and has worked with the AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Commission, and is also currently the co-chair of Sydney Young Energy Professionals. And last but certainly not least, Finian Murphy, who is a graduate of the Renewable Energy Engineering at the University of New South Wales. And he began working at the Climate Kick, the Knowledge Innovation Community, in 2019 as a project officer for the Business Renewables Centre, and joined Sun Cable in early 2021 as a photovoltaics engineer. So looking forward to hearing from everybody. So I'd like to hand it over now to Peter as our first speaker to set the scene. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Monica. So hello, I'm Peta Olesen from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. So I'm a director in our Net Zero Innovation and Partnerships team within our International Climate Division. Before I begin, I'd also like to acknowledge country. So I'm on the lands today of the Ngunnawal people, Ngunnawal and Ngambri in the Canberra region. So I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Next slide, please. And one more, please. Thanks. So I've been asked to speak about the government context and I guess the emphasis on industry, decarbonisation and embodied carbon. To do this, I'm going to just step through a couple of the key actions and ambitions of the new government that's going to underpin our ability to achieve low embodied carbon within our industry transformation. So we just have to, I guess, want to start with acknowledging the scale of the transformation. So Australia has a renewed climate ambition. We've got our legislated 2030 target of 43% below 2005 levels and a target for 82% renewable penetration of our national electricity grid by 2030. And this is the core of what the Department of Climate Change and Energy is focusing on. Now, for those who've been listening to Minister Bowen, the Minister for Climate and Energy, you'll know he keeps repeating that 2030 is now only 85 months away and he's counting down month by month. So it's not actually a lot of time to achieve these goals. One of the first big steps that we're taking to be able to support the renewable energy uptake is the Rewiring the Nation policy. So this is $20 billion that's just been committed through this federal budget for almost 10,000 kilometres worth of the transmission that we need in order to increase the capacity of the grid. It's huge. To put it into context, we estimate that to achieve our goals, Australia needs to install approximately 40 7-megawatt wind turbines a month, every month until 2030. Or that's more than 22,500 watt panels per day. So it's a lot of infrastructure. It's a lot of supply chains. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of skills and jobs, and it's only 85 months to do it. But getting this bit right is critical to how we can decarbonise the rest of the economy. Also, the energy transition presents enormous economic opportunities. So Australia has ambitions to be a renewable energy superpower. So we want to build to decarbonise the grid, but then we want to build beyond that. So we're able to support the full decarbonisation of our industries and our export industry as well. Next slide, please. Given that the budget was only 2 days ago, it would be remiss of me not to touch on a couple of key points. And I'm not going to run through all of these in detail, but I've just pulled out a couple of the key budget measures that I thought this group would be interested in that go into supporting industrial decarbonisation. The key one that I also wanted to just note, along with powering the regions, which is focused on that decarbonisation of our emissions intensive industrial hubs around the country, is also the final measure around carbon capture technologies, because the focus is on hard to abate industrial sectors. And that is going to continue to play a key role if we're going to be able to really get towards some of those green metals in particular, and clean cement for our buildings that we need. Next slide, please. So looking out to 2030, the industrial sector is projected to overtake electricity as Australia's leading source of emissions. One mechanism that we're working on to support this is the reform of the safeguard mechanism. And this is currently under public consultation for review. And this will help start to pull some of those big regulatory levers to drive down emissions from our big industrial producers. But we have to think about this as the opportunities that it presents. So Australia in the future can be a trusted and reliable source of key materials up and down the renewable supply chain, not just raw materials, but of manufactured compounds and of exported renewable energy itself. So this is the vision that we're working towards. The world will need steel to underpin the technology and infrastructure for the clean energy transformation. And 53% of the world's steel starts as Australian iron ore. Combining this with our abundant solar and wind, it's clear that Australia can set the foundations for a green steel supply chain. If we can get this right, we can really help enable huge emissions reductions across the globe. By 2030, the government's aim is to be exporting clean energy, critical minerals, batteries and components, as well as clean steel and aluminium, commodities produced by a thriving Australian economy driven by skills and innovation, with thousands of new jobs all across our regions. And the slide that I've put up here is just one that highlights some of the bilateral partnerships that we have with core countries that are based around those clean energy technologies, and starting to get those export and trade relationships running in this space. I'll do a quick deep dive into hydrogen as a great example here. Next slide, please. So if we can get this right, by 2030, Australia will be a major player in the global hydrogen industry. We'll use hydrogen to progressively decarbonise existing industries and heavy transport, and also links for chemical production. But a key thing that's going to help drive markets of low emissions materials and products that use our renewable energy and renewable hydrogen is standards and certification, something that I know this group is very familiar with. So the government is designing the Guarantee of Origin scheme for hydrogen to measure, track and verify emissions associated with hydrogen production. So it will initially cover hydrogen, hydrogen energy carriers and renewable electricity. However, it will establish a framework that could be applied to other products over time. As part of the Guarantee of Origin scheme, a stream of work is underway that will develop Guarantee of Origin for renewable electricity as an enduring mechanism to track and certify all renewable electricity, kind of beyond where we are now with the Renewable Energy Target. So the public consultation for the detailed scheme and design will open in the coming months, but I've also just dropped a note and a link that we did do a discussion paper last year on this for those who want to refresh and know more. I don't have a slide to cover this one, but I thought I would also specifically touch a bit more on the embodied carbon element. So as you would know, in last year, the New South Wales government offered to fund the development of a framework for embodied emissions to measure, verify and benchmark embodied emissions of buildings in Australia. So the framework will be nationally applicable and it'll be developed into the NABERS scheme, so the National Australian Built Environment Rating System. NABERS, in partnership with government jurisdictions across Australia, as well as, to achieve this, NABERS is working with government jurisdictions as well as industry organisations across the built environment. So the framework will be designed to be aligned with other widely used building sustainability schemes, such as Green Star. And I also understand from our NABERS team here that they will also be conducting public consultation on this framework in the coming months. Next slide, please. And because this is a bit more of my bread and butter, just to highlight, Mission Innovation and the Clean Energy Ministerial are two international collaborative forums that government work within and use them to drive both sides of the technology development spectrum. So the demand push of new technologies, R&D, innovation demonstrations, and then the supply push and the demand pull of those technologies through the policies and landscapes, procurement targets, and other things. Next slide, please. So specifically within mission innovation, which is set out under these kind of research mission structures, but those top three there that I've highlighted are forums that we are actively working within through CSIRO, through our cooperative research centres, and through government to help continue to drive the innovation that's needed to drive down emissions in our across the supply chain, but particularly thinking in our industry sectors. Next slide, please. And then a bit of kind of how I've also ended up in this group today is through the Clean Energy Ministerial's Industrial Deep Decarbonisation Initiative. Now, this initiative is running global calls for green procurement commitments from governments and from companies, but within their work stream are working on a suite of programs that very much match to what MECLA is trying to achieve. And they have deep dive working groups on the data certifications and standards. And so it's through my engagement in this working group that I've then kind of come to realize exactly what it is that how MECLA is bringing all of our expertise to the table and trying to make sure that we're working lockstep with these international forums so that when global standards are being designed, that they are what we need for here in Australia and reflect our own domestic circumstances. So more than happy for people to reach out if they want to know more about these initiatives, and that these are public-private partnerships. So they're open to anyone to engage in. You don't necessarily need a green tick from government, but government has leaned in on these as something to show that we're interested in. But we really welcome others who want to know more or be involved to reach out. And that's all I've got for you today. So happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Peta. You know, that's a very ambitious agenda that the federal government has, and certainly for a lot of responsibility on your shoulders as a government advisor to bring some of that together. I certainly see that the industry decarbonisation program does sort of mimic a lot of what MECLA is trying to achieve, and having had a couple of conversations with the group, I think it would be well worth our while for some Australian companies tapping into that as we start to build out the international program there.